do the, yeah, now we're live out in the real world. Bailey, would you be willing to have your camera on and do the hand signals for the competitors?
I can. Hopefully my connection is strong enough.
Well, I can see you really well.
Okay.
And and would you be willing to do the timing for them?
Yeah, I can do time signals.
Okay.
I'll go over them really quick just so we all know. Let's see. This is impromptu. Okay. So I'll do. When do people normally start? Is it at the 5 or 4 minute maybe? 4 minute, 3, 2, 1. Do 30
30-second.
and then 10-second countdown.
Yeah, I think that'd be swell. Are the competitors all comfortable with that? Hearing no objections,
Yes.
I'm going to start with Mona. Mona, I'm going to. This first time I've done this, so let me open the chat right there. Theoretically, I copied the prompts. So the way I want to do this, since it's an online tournament, is I'm going to post the prompts in the chat, Mona, and give you a second to look at them. Give you a couple of seconds to look at them. Hopefully, within 10 seconds, you're going to say I've picked one, and when you say I've picked one, Bailey's going to start the 7-minute clock. Okay.
Sounds good.
So we'll give you a few seconds. So are you ready to go?
Yes, ready whenever you are.
Okay, let's see if I hit paste, is this going to work? Theoretically, and then send that. There we go. 3 prompts in the chat. Do you see them, Mona?
Yes, I see them, and I've picked one.
Excellent. Bailey, please start the 7-minute clock, and away we go.
Verbal time, that's 1 minute used.
The song Baraya by Shervin Hajipur is a song of activism. In the song, Hajipur describes things that the Iranian people are fighting for within the protests that started since last September after Mahsa Amini's death. And the Iranian people have shown a lot of bravery, which is why exactly this reminded me of the quotation I received today. The only way to stop feeling afraid of something is to face it, from Ozek. And I interpreted this quotation to mean that bravery is when you face your fear. And I agree with this quotation and interpretation, and I'll discuss 3 examples why I agree with this. First, I will discuss the Battle of Karbala. Second, I will discuss the story Darius the Great is not okay. And third, I will describe the story of Henrietta Lacks. First, let's get started by talking about the Battle of Karbala. The Battle of Karbala is one that is commemorated thousands of years later. But what is it? Karbala refers to the battle that took place in 680 AD and is the story of when the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, the messenger of God for the religion of Islam, faced a battle against the current caliphate of the time, Yazid. He didn't have many people on his team. A very small group of people believed in him and believed in Hussein, who was fighting the war. But he was still working towards making sure that he could go against such a big force. Ultimately, this force was conquering them, and they ended up being massacred. However, when we look back on the story of Karbala, we can see how Hussein and his comrades were standing up for what they believed in was right, and they faced their fears and were able to conquer that, even if they ultimately died. As thousands of years later, the Shia Islam sect still commemorates this event during the Islamic month of Muharram. Now that we've discussed Karbala, next, let's discuss the book Darius the Great is Not Okay. Darius the Great is Not Okay discusses the story of an half Iranian, half white young boy in high school named Darius, after Darius the Great, an empire in ancient Persia. He doesn't know a lot of Persian, and he doesn't feel a lot of connection to his roots in Iran. In fact, the only thing that really ties him to it is the fact that he loves tea. But when he's faced with a big task, his grandfather is nearing death, and his parents' decision to go visit them in Iran before his passing away, he has to learn to conquer that fear and get to engage with those around him within the country of Iran, despite the fact that his grasp on the language is very limited, even in comparison to his younger sister. However, throughout the book, he gets to face that fear and start to make friends, as well as engage with his grandparents and find connections that rely on other commonalities they have, such as their love for tea. This helps demonstrate how Darius was being able to be brave in terms of facing his fear of not knowing how to interact with his Iranian heritage. Now that we've talked about Darius the Great is Not Okay, next, let's discuss the story of Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks is a young woman, and in the 1950s, she was diagnosed with cancer. This is a really scary thing that can happen to anyone. But as a mother to many children and a very compassionate woman, she took the steps that she needed to do to treat herself. She visited a hospital where, while she ended up dying in the end, she took the steps to conquer that fear of, oh, well, I'm sure it's fine, and make sure to get the treatment that she could get at the time. In the end, her death was very tragic, as well as as well as the fact that her family was left without her warm presence. However, her cancer cells helped spur movement, helped spur the start of amazing things within the medical field itself. In fact, her cancer cells were the first immortal cells and helped work towards projects such as vaccines for polio, as well as other medical accomplishments. By taking the first step to conquer her fear of what was happening to her body by visiting that hospital, Henrietta Lacks demonstrated that she was able to face her fear, that something was wrong with her, and accomplish a sense of bravery in doing so and going back and trying to get that treatment. Now that we've discussed the story of Henrietta Lacks, next, let's wrap up by reviewing what I talked to you about today. Today, I received the quotation, "The only way to stop feeling afraid of something is to face it," from Ozark. And I interpreted this quotation to mean that bravery is when you face your fears. And I agreed with it, and I discussed this through three main examples. First, I talked to you about the Battle of Karbala. Second, I talked about this story, Darius the Great is Not Okay. And third, I talked about Henrietta Lacks' life. So, Baraye by Shervin Hajipur, how does that tie in? Shervin ended up going to jail for his song after its release. However, he still showed bravery in facing that fear and was able to get out on bail. But even after that, he has still been facing multiple trials and tribulations, and he has continued to face that fear bravely. And it has paid off. He is now a Grammy Award-winning artist because of his song Baraye.
All right, Mona, thank you very much. Alrighty, so now we're off to the second competitor, which is Jonathan. Jonathan, let me go back to the ballot over here and do that. Let's see. Go to get rid of the prompts for the first one. Find the prompts for Jonathan. Found them. Copy them onto the clipboard. Back to here. So, Jonathan, there you are. Okay, good. Got your camera on. Say a few words, Jonathan. Let's confirm audio.
Hello, hello.
Hello works. Yes, you definitely have audio. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. Bailey's going to time you and provide hand signals. I'm going to bring up the chat now, and I'm about to give you three prompts in the chat. We'll give you a few seconds to look them over. You just say, "Hey, I got one," and when you say "I got one," Bailey's going to start the 7-minute clock. Okay?
Sounds good. Quick question, Bailey. Do you mind giving verbal timeouts every 30-second increments? If that's
Yes,
okay.
I was just about to ask because I forgot in the beginning. Does everyone want 30-second or just the minute? You want 30-second?
Yes, if that's okay. So 30 seconds, 1 minute used, 1:30, and then
Great.
to probably started speaking.
Awesome. I will do that. No problem.
I think Bailey gets additional pay for adding the more time slots, but we'll do that. All right, Jonathan, you ready for your prompts?
Yes.
All right, here they come. Paste them in there. Send them to you. There's your prompts.
Okay. Reading prompt now.
All right, Jonathan, have you chosen one?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot to tell you. Hands up. I chose.
That's okay.
Which one?
It's all right. Start the clock, Bailey.
Yeah.
Clock is now started. You can announce it when you start your speech.
Sounds good.
"30 seconds used." "1 minute used." "1 minute 30 used."
Mallory Milton was born in Ireland in 1884, and she immigrated to the United States in 1896. And Mallory Milton loved to cook, as it was her specialty. She cooked for plenty of wealthy families, especially in the United States. But Mallory was actually diagnosed with something called salmonella typhi, which is evolving kind of around a food poisoning based sickness that isn't really good for everybody. And especially the times that seasons change and in the cold, it can really bring detrimental effects. This reminded me of the quotation that I chose today: "Winter is coming" by Game of Thrones. And what I believe that Game of Thrones is trying to tell us is that seasons always change, but something could be coming. And because if seasons are always consistently changing, then the weather is not going to be up to tip-top shape. And I actually agree with this, and I can show you through 3 stories that I brought with me today that prove my examples. So the first story is going to be about school balloons. The second one, about a sweet, delicious frozen treat. And the last one, about a 9-year-old girl. So this first story I have for you is actually pretty insane. It revolves around a high school or middle school experiment that decided to stay unanimous. So they took 200 sixth graders and told the sixth graders to fill up a balloon and write their name on it. That's exactly what they did and threw them in the hallway. The professor then told them to try to find your balloon with your own name on it. It's 20 minutes that passed by and they actually couldn't. The professor called them back and told them, okay, now The first balloon you see, I want you to read that name and give it to that person. And with little less than 15 minutes, the whole hallway was cleared out, showing that teamwork could really come together, especially that through that example of the school balloons, the professors really wanted to tell the students and teach them that happiness isn't something you tend to go by looking for yourself, but it comes a lot easier with the help of others. And especially this example relates to the quotation because especially in late seasons when it's very cold or anything like that, we tend to kind of get mean and nasty. We don't really like to be nice with other people. So this second story I have lined up for you is actually kind of interesting. So it's by the boy named Frank Epperson, and Frank Epperson was only 11 years old at the time when he was trying to create a delicious drink. He was trying to make soda. So he put his powdered flavoring in, put it in a cup, and started stirring it with the mixture. He accidentally left his whole mixture outside for the night and came back to it the next morning. Despite it being winter, he actually realized he had something new. Instead of that soda, he actually had a frozen treat that was super delicious. He was super engaged by this and he wanted to show his classmates, and so he did. His classmates started calling it the Epsicle, and he later got patented and called it Popsicle. And we could still see Popsicle sold in stores today, almost any store you go to. Now, this very last story I have for you is about a 9-year-old girl. Her name is Molly Sampson. Molly Sampson asked for something super crazily bizarre that not many 9-year-olds would ask for on Christmas. And on Christmas Day, she got exactly what she asked for, which was shark tooth hunting equipment. I know, not much 9-year-olds would want that. But despite it being Christmas Day, she begged her dad to try out her new equipment. So her dad gave in and they actually took her to the closest state park. And at the closest state park beach, she declared to her dad upon arrival that she was going to find the biggest megalodon tooth. So her dad kind of chuckled and shooed her away. Little to his knowledge, she actually came running back to him almost an hour later. Dad, look, with the huge megalodon tooth in her hand. They immediately got evaluated by a local paleontologist and claimed that it was a once-in-a-lifetime find. I guess Christmas miracles do come true. Through the example of Molly Sampson, it shows us that Christmas miracles, especially evolving around winter, always brings change. And that change is definitely going to show that the seasons throughout the future is going to be completely different, especially with yourself. Now, returning back to the quotation that I chose today, winter is coming by Game of Thrones. And what I believe that they were trying to tell me is that seasons always change, but something is coming. Because if you're always waiting for seasons to change or something to actually happen, then it theoretically won't. And I showed you why this proves true through 3 stories of mine. Through school balloons, through a popsicle, and through Molly Sampson, the 9-year-old. And even when we wrap it all the way back to Mallory Milton, she was actually diagnosed set to quarantine for 26 years on 2 separate occasions. But especially being winter, she didn't care. She wanted to push through, and she still actually cooked for these wealthy families and was considered to be one of the large reasons for the New Yorkers' outbreak for Salmonella die.
All right, Jonathan, thank you very much. All right, now it's Aaron's turn next. Aaron, let me go back over to the ballot and let's see, close that, find your portion of the ballot and find your prompts. Copy the prompts. All right. Back over to you. Okay, so Aaron, if you hadn't heard how this is going to work, is I'm going to open up the chat now, and there it is. I'm going to paste your 3 prompts in the chat. Give you a few seconds. When you've chosen one, please just say, "Hey, I got one." You don't have to literally say that, but just tell us you got one. And Bailey is going to be your timer. She'll give you your hand signals. Okay. Are you all set?
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, I'm good.
Right. Here come the prompts now, and sending them now.
Okay, I've got one.
Bless your heart. Okay, Bailey, start the 7 minutes, and away we go.
30 seconds, please. One minute each.
Rosa Parks was a huge activist within the civil rights, and she began the Montgomery bus boycott by refusing to get out of her seat. And Rosa Parks was really important in showing that the Black community was not about to back down and that they wanted to have their rights. She constantly was proving throughout the NAACP as a member, showing that Black community deserved to have rights within her society. And so that leads me to the quote today of, "I am the one who knocks," from Breaking Bad. And I believe that this quote is trying to say that you have to do what is right. And we can agree with this by seeing instances where we face danger to save others, and you have to defend yourself. So looking at my first argument of face danger to save others, we have to face some sort of danger in our lives in order to do for the betterment of society. And sometimes that danger is unknown and unpredictable. And so looking at that, I have two examples, the Stanford prison experiment and the kiss of life. First, looking at the Stanford prison experiment, it was an experiment that took a bunch of college students and split them between prisoners and the police officers, and constantly was talking about and showed how they were acting in the society when they put in this controlled situation, and how the police officers were constantly beating against the prisoners and used their abuse of power. And their abuse of power, that what they did is the prisoners eventually were like, we have to stick together, we have to face up to these police officers, we have to face up to the researcher who was getting so involved into this experiment that he had to show him a way to calm down so that they could have a better life, because this was impacting their mental and physical health. So the prisoners had to come together to find a way to face this danger. And then looking at the kiss of life, the kiss of life is a monument event of a picture where two electricians were fixing their electricity on a pole way up high. They were on harnesses, and one guy got electrocuted. And he was hanging there lifeless, upside down. And the second electrician started giving him CPR and also giving it mouth to mouth in the air, because he knew it was a life or death situation, and he had to save others. And he had to save this guy so that, he didn't die. He had to face the danger of even being up in the air, being an electrician. He had to face this, and he had to do what was right because he had to save this guy's life. So you can see through the Stanford prison experiment and through the kiss of life how we have to face danger to save others, and do this by doing what is right for our society. And then looking at the second argument of defend yourself, I have two examples. We have to defend ourselves because we have to do what is right for either ourselves personally or for others around us. And we can see this through Will Smith, and we can see this through Johnny Depp. First, looking at Will Smith, what Will Smith did at the award ceremony to Chris Rock was not okay. But at the same time, he did what he thought was right in order to protect his wife. His wife, Jada Pinkett, was, after Chris Rock made a joke about her alopecia and how this is a situation in which her hair is falling out, she doesn't have any control over it. And when he made that G.I. Jane joke, yes, Will Smith was not okay with slapping Chris Rock, but what he did was he was trying to defend his family, defend his wife, because this is somebody that he loves and he cares for. So Will Smith had to defend himself and his family and the beliefs that he has, because it wasn't okay for him to joke about this. And then looking at Johnny Depp is a famous actor, and we love him to death. And he had to constantly defend himself against Amber Heard and through many, many trials through 2018 and 2020. And 2022, we've seen this because he had to defend himself and show that he was not going to back down. He was not a domestic abuser. He needed to have these put out there and the evidence put out there that he was not in the wrong. He constantly had to defend himself and do what was right for him, because he knew that this was not about him being an abuser, because he was not. He was about the defamation that she was giving him, about all the deals that he had lost, and how he had to go back into the society and he had to defend what he was doing in this statement. So we can see through both Will Smith and Johnny Depp that you have to defend yourself and for those you love, because you have to do what is right for you in your society. So going back to the quote today of "I'm the one who knocks" from Breaking Bad, we can see that this is trying to say that you have to do what is right. And we can agree with this by showing how we face danger to save others through the Stanford Prison Experiment and the Kiss of Life, and then how we have to defend ourselves for those we love. And we've seen this through Will Smith and Johnny Depp. Going back to Rosa Parks faced many dangers of going to jail or even being beat up by police officers when she refused to get off of that bus. But she had to do what was right so that her community wasn't forced to sit on the back of the bus. She had to defend herself in prison by showing what was okay and how she was like, this is not okay, and we have to do what is right for our society. And Rosa Parks is influential, and it was fantastic at that.
All right, Aaron, thank you. Appreciate that. So next on the ballot today is Ashton. Let's see.
Yes, sir.
There's Ashton right over there. Ashton, there you go. Got your camera working. Say hello so we can check your sound.
Hello.
That works. Okay. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to put your prompts in the chat in just a moment. And then after you have a few moments to look at the three prompts, say I've picked one. And the moment you say I've picked one, Bailey is going to provide your hand signals and start the 7-minute clock. Okay.
Okay. I got
right.
a question.
Yeah.
Could you tell me your 30 and your 15 signals again?
Yeah, she does the cup C for 30 seconds. And what are you doing for 15?
I wasn't doing 15. I was just doing 10.
10 seconds down.
Would you like a 15?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What do people normally do for 15?
Flat hand straight across.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do this.
That works. Okay, now that we've got the sign language put together, let's do the paste of the prompts. You ready to go, Ashton?
Yes, sir.
Here come your prompts. Tell us when you've picked one.
All right, I have picked one.
Excellent. Okay, Bailey, start the clock, please, and away we go.
"30 seconds used." "1 minute used."
I am double entered in most of my tournaments, which is pretty sad because I love watching other people speak, especially in Impromptu, because I love looking at how people with different perceptions and different backgrounds look at the same quotes that we have, or even different quotes for other tournaments, and I am able to see what they think of it, what their interpretation is of it, and look at those differences and how the beauty comes out of that. So if we look at today's quote, it's not about money, it's about sending a message from the Dark Knight. What we can pull from today's quote is that the interpretation is to remember that the messages that you send are not always going to be received the same way that you interpreted them. And that it's up to the interpretation of the receiver of the message to be able to continue forth in the communication process. So today we're going to look at the background of this by looking at the bona fide group theory. Then we're going to look at the application of this through the video game It Takes Two. And then we can look at some implications of this from the anime Cowboy Bebop. So what exactly is bona fide group theory? So bona fide group theory quite literally is just looking at how a group interacts. Such as if you're working on a group project together, somebody might be the leader, somebody might be the negative person that is always pushing back progress, somebody else might always want the attention, and somebody else may never talk. It's looking at how everybody in a group comes together and the way that they speak to each other. So the way that we can connect this to today's quote is by looking at how the messages are interpreted. Because of the way you send a message, it may not be received the same way that you mean it. So for instance, whenever I tell my boyfriend that I really need him to go get some mixed nuts from the grocery store, he will usually get me peanuts, not mixed nuts. Unless I specifically tell him, get the Planters mixed nuts with the purple label on it. It is not hard, Devin. But because of the way that I am sending the message, and because of the way he grew up versus the way I grew up, and how we learned language together, they are completely different. So this is something that you always need to take into account whenever you are having an active communication process with someone or with multiple people. So we can look at this being applied through the video game It Takes Two. The video game It Takes Two is a cozy game where it is two players going through a bunch of symbolic levels together. The creators of this game are a husband and a wife who went through a seriously rocky path where they absolutely considered divorce, and they were working through a bunch of life problems all together. But as the game states, it takes two. It takes two to tango, and it takes two to go through a marriage together. So in this game, what we could see is that through the symbolic levels and the symbolic dialogue that these two characters have, it's all about working through these problems together. Recognize that yes, what you send may not be the same message that they interpret, but even if they don't interpret it the same way you do, work through that miscommunication. Just as they did through the video game, as you can see in the end, and as you can see them being interviewed by various video game magazines, they did work through their marriage problems. Thus, they were able to create the video game together. An implication that we can see from this is by looking at the anime Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy Bebop is an amazing anime. It was one of the frontier animes that created the genre and made it super popular in America. From the 90s, it follows a space cowboy and all of his colleagues on a floating spaceship as they go on bounty hunting trips throughout the galaxy. So, Spike, the space cowboy, he sends his kid colleague on a little adventure, and kid colleague named Ed decides, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be helpful. And they decide, let's go get some food for everybody because I'm starving and everybody else is starving. So as Ed is traveling around on this random planet that she's never been to, she decides, whoa, I'm hearing a lot of people talking about these certain mushrooms. So mushrooms, we can make a lot of dishes out of that. She gets the mushrooms and realizes that they are illegally imported mushrooms. Mushrooms, if you mind. So as she brings these mushrooms back to the ship, she realizes this is not exactly what they asked for, and they were just eating boiled mushrooms for weeks after Ed realized, oh, these aren't regular mushrooms, they're special mushrooms. So it took them a couple of weeks of trying to figure out what exactly was going on until they figured out what exactly was going on. An implication that we can pull from this is that you can hurt people in the end, either physically or emotionally, if you do not work through that miscommunication, as Ed did, because the entire crew got sick from eating these special mushrooms because she misunderstood what exactly these mushrooms were. So if we look back at today's quote, it's not about money, it's about sending a message. From The Dark Knight, what we did today was look at the bona fide group theory. We looked at how this could be applied to the video game It Takes Two, and we looked at how this could have some implications from the anime of Cowboy Bebop. What we could pull from this today is listen to yourself. It's all about active listening. And if Devin would just listen to me for one time, I can trust him to go to the grocery store on his own. So listen to each other. Look at how you are speaking, the words you are choosing, and make sure that you take others into account.
All right, Ashton, good job. All right. We're moving right along here very well. It's Chloe's turn coming up next. Chloe, let me, there you are.
Super quick. Are you able to see and hear me okay?
I can, both works for me.
Great. If at any time you can't see or hear, just let me know and I'll like shuffle around or something.
The fun of online tournaments. Yes, we will work it out. So, what we're doing here is let me go back to the ballot and close out some boxes here. Close that out. Let's go get Chloe's prompts right there. Copy the prompts onto the clipboard. That's done. Back to the field. Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to drop your prompts here into the chat in just a moment. And then you pick one after a few seconds. Tell us you've picked one. And the moment you've told us you picked one, Bailey's going to start the 7-minute clock and we'll give you hand signals. Okay.
Perfect.
All righty. So I'm dropping the prompts into the box now and I'm sending them to you now.
Okay, I picked a prompt.
Very good. The 7-minute clock starts and we're off and running.
"30 seconds used." "1 minute used." "Minute 30 used."
The year is 1495, and you've just received word that Pope Alexander VI has, what's that, attempted to excommunicate a comet? While this seems kind of comical for us, we need to think back to the times. Pope Alexander VI really thought he had control over something that essentially was so far out in space, there's really nothing he could have done. And despite the excommunication, I reassure you all, the comet continued to go. He really had no effect on it. Now, this reminded me of the quotation I received today, which is, "It's not easy being green." I interpreted this to mean that it can be hard sometimes to accept ourselves in the situations we're in. This can be said about Pope Alexander, who really couldn't handle the idea of the comet as he thought it might lead to the apocalypse. So he tried to do something about it, instead of just accepting the situation and the fact that he really had no control over this celestial object. Today, I will be demonstrating why it's sometimes hard to accept ourselves in our situations by looking through 3 main lenses. First, we will be examining a psychological theory. Secondly, we will be examining a historical figure. And lastly, we will be looking at a place on our own planet. Now, Let's start by moving into the psychological theory of the spotlight effect. Essentially, the spotlight effect refers to the idea that we're often extremely self-conscious, and we tend to believe that people are always looking at us. We have so much attention on us all the time, when in reality, this often isn't the case. And I'm sure we've all been there, out in public, and you're convinced everyone's looking at you, they're judging your outfit, and you're wishing maybe you had spent a little bit more time on your makeup. But in reality, no one cares. No one's really looking at you. But this kind of ties into the idea that we get really concerned about how we perceive ourselves. It's hard for us to accept ourselves, and that makes us believe that we're constantly being judged. When we don't accept who we truly are, we're in constant fear of judgment. We constantly feel like we're being watched because we're not really happy with who we are, so why would other people be? And that relates to my interpretation because it shows that sometimes, even though you are your true authentic version of yourself, it can be hard for you to accept that, and by extension, hard for you to believe that others will accept that as well. Now, this brings me into my second example, the historical figure Mary Anning. Mary Anning was a paleontologist in the 19th century who was remarkable. Not only was she one of the first female paleontologists in the field, but she faced tremendous discrimination. In fact, being a woman made it a lot harder for her to do her job, a job that was so important and so crucial. We see that not only did she make significant contributions to the field of paleontology, but she also found and completed the first Ichthyosaurus skeleton. Now, this is no small feat, especially for someone who had been so discriminated against out of her field. And, if she had listened to that discrimination, if she had listened to all the voices that told her, no, you can't do this, you're a woman, you'll never be able to level up to the point where men are, she may have never been able to accomplish this. So ultimately, we see it was hard for her to accept herself, to get beyond the pressure society had put on her, the discrimination she was facing, but ultimately, when she was able to get past that, when she was able to get past her acceptance of herself, she was able to do remarkable things. Now, this ties into the idea that it can be difficult to accept ourselves, especially when we have tremendous adversities in our lives. Even if Mary Anning was insecure, it was made worse by the fact that there were others constantly telling her what she could and could not do. Therefore, she was able to overcome that feeling of low self-acceptance, and she was able to really make a name for herself, doing things that many other people could never say that they were able to accomplish. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the Mary Cemetery. Now, the Mary Cemetery is in Romania, and it is a very unique cemetery for a lot of reasons. Firstly, all the tombstones are adorned with these beautiful, colorful, and often humorous epitaphs that talk about the life of the deceased. And essentially, this is a unique and lighthearted take on death. It's not very often that we see a cemetery that's beautifully adorned and beautifully decorated. And essentially, this serves as our reminder that maybe we can look at things in different lenses. Now, this relates to my interpretation because it can be hard to accept ourselves in our situations. And for the Romanian people in the cemetery, it can be difficult to accept that death is a cold and depressing thing. So how do they deal with this? By creating a cemetery that is beautiful and colorful as a way to deal with a situation that may otherwise be hard to accept. Death is not an easy thing for anyone, but the creation of a Mary cemetery with colorful tombstones can really help to put a lighthearted and unique spin on things. Now, today, we looked at the quotation, "It's not easy being green" from Sesame Street, a quotation which I interpreted to mean that it can sometimes be hard to accept ourselves in the situations that we're in. I agree with this interpretation, and today we examine this through three main arguments and three main lenses. Firstly, we looked at the psychological theory of the spotlight effect. Essentially, when we don't believe in ourselves, we believe that other people will share these beliefs when we have so much attention on us, when really, this is never the case. We looked at the historical figure Mary Anning and how she overcame great adversity and was able to accept herself in her male-dominated field of paleontology. And lastly, we looked at the Mary Cemetery, a place where people took a hard-to-accept thing like death, made it into something cheerful and unique. So now, when we go back to Pope Alexander VI, we see that it was hard for him to accept the comet, when really he should have just been able to accept it instead of trying to put so much action against it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So there we go. And now our final competitor in the round is Kim. So there's Kim. All right, Kim, let me go back to my ballot and find, let's see, close that. And go to Kim's section here, find the prompts.
And just to check, can you hear me okay?
Hear you just fine.
Great.
That takes care of that. Back this way. So I'm about to drop your prompts into the chat. We'll give you a few seconds to look them over. When you've picked one, just say, "I got one," And Bailey will then start the 7-minute clock and start your hand signals, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, so I'm copying them, pasting them in the chat as we speak right there. And here they come to you.
I've selected my prompt.
Okay, Bailey will start the clock and away we go.
Thirty seconds used. One minute used.
Current South African President Ramaphosa knows how to sweep things under the rug. Last year, he was convicted of Farmgate, where he allegedly stole over $4 million and put it in his couch. Ramaphosa, in this very weird, bizarre crime, Farmgate, really shows us how leaders can kind of get away with any type of crime or any type of wrongdoing solely because of their position. With this idea in mind of leaders really abusing the power and things getting swept on the rug, leads us to today's quotation in the words of Captain Phillips. I am the captain now. What Captain Phillips is trying to communicate to us is leaders must always show a dominance. They simply can get away with anything they want because of their position and title. We have to agree with Captain Phillips because how I see it, leaders often abuse their power. And unfortunately, things do get swept under the rug and they can continue on their leadership style. Let's look at that thesis through three main lenses. First, Executive Order 4311. Second, the social credit system in China. And finally, former CEO of Celestial Seasonings, Mo Siegel. First, Executive Order 4311 was issued by Ford in 1974. And it really shows Ford and how he sweeps things under the rug. See, this executive order pardoned Nixon of any wrongdoings or crimes he committed when he was president, including anything dealing with Watergate. 4311 really shows us how a leader solely abused their power. Ford just really was concentrating on himself and his post-career after presidency. He wasn't looking after the everyday American and how he was trying to keep the country safe. With 4311 and Ford really abusing his power because of his role being president of the United States, we really see the thesis embedded into today's quotation, abuse of power. We saw that Ford was simply trying to be a captain of his ship versus helping everyday American citizens. To continue to build on a theme of leaders really abusing the power and things getting swept under the rug, let's look at the social credit system that was launched in China in 2020. China's government leaders really thought they needed to take control of their own citizens, and they really want to abuse their power. They really launched this very unique social credit system where citizens are given a social score based on their behavior to one another. However, within the social credit system, it really sees things get swept on the rug. China continues to be a communist and very dystopian style leadership style country. The social credit system shows us how the government leaders are only looking after themselves and how they can obtain more power within China versus looking after the everyday citizens. The social criticism and the government leaders in China really showed us the thesis within today's quotation: abuse of power. Things are getting swept under the rugs, and the Chinese citizens are simply having to obey to their own government. To continue to build on this thesis of really abusing power, let's look at former CEO of Celestial Seasonings, Mo Siegel. You see, he recently stepped down as physician, but he really believed in this New Age Bible where celestial seasonings roam the earth and inferior races must be removed from this country. However, it really shows, despite having this bizarre racist mindset, he continued to be CEO, and it really bled into his leadership style and within the company of Celestial Seasonings. He was simply trying to show everyone he was captain of his ship. He did not want to bring fresh teas and natural medicine to the country. He simply started Celestial Seasonings so he could really bleed this dystopian style leadership into the country and into his own company. Mo Siegel really shows us this thesis within today's quotation. He's CEO, and he wanted his employees to believe exactly what he believed, this New Age Bible. Going back to today's quotation in the words of Captain Phillips, "I'm the captain now." What this quotation is trying to say is leaders really abuse of power, specifically because of their title or even profession. We agreed with Captain Phillips. How I see it, things get swept under the rug and people continue with this dystopian leadership style. We definitely saw that thesis through three lenses today: Executive Order 4311, the social credit system in China, and finally, former CEO of Celestial Seasonings, Mo Siegel. Every single one of these lenses, as well as South African President Ramaphosa, really showed us how leaders are simply only looking after themselves. They aren't looking to help the everyday people, and they only want to keep their position and their title. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it. Okay, the work for the judges is cut out, and good luck to all the competitors for the award ceremony coming up.
Thanks for judging.
Hey, you're very welcome. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for judging. Good luck, everyone.
You're welcome.
Good job, everyone.